Hello and welcome to Spotlight, sharing stories and creating connections. My name is Jerry Dixon. I am the artistic director at Village Theater. Tonight's theme, we tell the story part 2. Remember, part 1 was last week with Rodney Hicks. That was a fascinating conversation, which means that there's a part 3 because we didn't get all the way through it. But we're going to get to a lot of wonderful things tonight. So let me get started. I have had the pleasure of working with these two artists on 2 different projects. And in that limited time, I was able to be assured that I needed to get into the minds and hearts of these 2 artists to get to know what was going on inside of Keiko Green and Lamar Legend. Please welcome them to Spotlight. Hello, Keiko. Hello, Lamar. Welcome.
Hello.
I am so happy to have you here. I like to start people off with their hyphens. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So if I say Keiko Green, playwright, performer, add a few more hyphenated words to that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, playwright, performer, proud dog owner, and paint hobbyist.
What?
I like to paint, but only as a hobby.
Okay, houses or pictures?
Oh, pictures. Okay. Paintings.
Look, I could imagine you on a ladder. I'm not saying you can't do it.
I would look good on a ladder, I think.
Okay, Lamar Legend, performer, director.
Writer, I'd say lay producer, I'd say comic book nerd, I'd say knitter, crocheter, slam poet, and a teaching artist.
Wow. Okay. You both.
Right on.
Okay. I don't even know where you both find the time to do 2 or 3 of those things. That's amazing.
Oh, we're not doing them all at once.
Well, maybe that.
Speak for yourself.
Oh, fair. Sorry.
Is that a show? Listen. I'm starting to believe that I have an affinity for very long titled shows because Keiko, you and I worked together in the Curious Incident of the Dog in the Night-Tme.
Sure did.
Yes,
there I
right?
am. Yes.
And then not much shorter, Lamar and I worked on Hansel and Gretl and Heidi Günter.
Yes.
So I said to me, both of these productions, what they have in common for me is they both really rely heavily on the acting companies, that high creative collaborative spirit, right? And I think, like how much courage for you as an actor, I know it takes courage to do those types of things where like Curious Incident had a bit of a roadmap, but not much. It kind of tells you the park, and then you have to go. And then
Right.
Hansel and Gretl and Heidi Günter, we were creating the roadmap. So talk to me about the courage of actors and acting companies, of how to get to there when you don't have a gazillion specifics laid out for you. Start it, Keiko. Start off.
Yeah, I think that I think we'll probably get to this a little bit later anyway, so I'm going to tease this, but my favorite part of working on a show, even as a performer, is the rehearsal process. And there's actually a part of me that gets really sad once we open, even though I love the audiences, because that building part is over and now we're reliving every day, and the reliving is fresh, but it's different than that collaborative build. And so I think that at least, I can't speak for the Heidi, Hansel and Gretel, and what is it?
Heidi and Günter.
Yeah, Günter. But I know for Curious Incident, I think that you had built this really great ensemble that really thrived in that, like, in that feeling of play and building. And so so it ended up just being like the best case scenario for theater, where you're just building and building and playing and getting really dirty.
Yeah, it really
Messing
felt
up.
like we were definitely living in the land of and or. And what else you
Yes.
got?
Yes.
Yeah.
And scrapping, I feel like there were certain things that we scrapped every time we did it and tried and built it again. And and up until the opening, which was
Yeah. What about you, Lamar?
dangerous.
So then you're Hansel and Gretel Heidi Günter, this is actually, we're building the blueprint. We didn't even have one to start off with, really.
Totally.
So, I mean, we had the script, of course, but that's a whole different thing when plays can be written and musicals have to be built.
Oh my gosh. I mean, well, I'm going to give a different answer, I think, than actual performers who don't do other things would. And I'm curious to hear what Keiko has to say about it as a fellow writer, because I would assume she would agree that, like, I want to be in the room with the writers as they're making it happen. And that was the most exciting part of the whole experience, was that coming in every day and we got new pages. And I was just like, what's going to be different this time? And watching it happen. And I thought that was, I mean, you know, when you're a performer, you have to have a certain willingness to be open to change. Like, I mean, not just creatively, but also in your life. You know, like, if you're gigging and gigging and gigging, you're going to experience change from one gig to the next. And it's, you know, you're a traveling circus, you know, or a traveling troupe. Like, it's just a different ball of wax where you go, what story you're telling, you know, and you have to be open to that. I love that part of it.
You know, I thought, you know, when I think about it, Lamar, I think about going back to Curious, is I think that playwright and that original company had that in mind. And rather than constrain each different acting company to doing what they did, they said, let's keep it open-ended. Let's do that with intent and go, what will you create for your theater company and your people and your audiences? And I think that's really kind of audacious for writers to give over that kind of control. What do you think about that, Keiko?
Yeah, I mean, you know, ultimately it's the fun of a piece like that that's written so it's complicated in its simplicity, you know. It's everything can be done really basically, but it can also be as complicated as you want it to be. And so there's something really fun about everyone starting with these basic building blocks and then being able to add whatever resources they have available to them. And you know, that's why every single production looks, you know, you certainly can, you know, the dialogue's the same, the characters are the same, but you see videos of them and they look so distinctly different from each other, which I more than any other show that I can really think of.
Yeah, and that really is definitely a testament to the original creators of that show. So outside of your Village Theater experiences, both of you have such a large body of work, and I just want to hit on just a couple of them with some images. Lamar, you've been seen in Necessary Sacrifices. Frederick Douglass. Is that a wig?
Of course it is. Oh God, had to be the #1 question I got asked every performance. Like, is that a wig?
I am so glad that you featured that wig on many a post. So I was being facetious.
I love her. Looked so old, and boy, because it was like burning, like in that wig. And so during intermission, I would sit in front of the fan and have a Beyonce moment and just let the hair flow.
You got to hydrate and cool off.
Exactly.
Oh my God. So let me see. I missed one. Oh yes, Little Prince. Well, you were an aviator.
Yeah, that was a wonderful. I call that like my Seattle theater debut, professionally speaking. It was such a great, lovely time. It was hard because you think, you know, you're getting to do a children's show and it'll be like, oh, I get to play a house and, you know, and wow a bunch of kids or a tree, you know, or a witch or something like that. And if anyone knows Little Prince, and so many people do, their fans are incredibly loyal. It is a story that gets you thinking that it's for the kids, but it's really for the adults. And I found myself, I had a closing monologue and an opening monologue, and I found myself at the closing monologue weeping every single night, and the kids were having none of it. The parents were on the floor, but the kids were like, what?
Why?
This is one of those shows. I was just gonna say, Lamar and I actually we never worked together, right?
No.
This would have been because there was a point where I was gonna maybe do the show, and this would have been this would have been it.
That's
We
okay,
missed
because
out.
no,
And
there'll be shows in the
had
future.
that very question for you too, because you know how you figure like there are types of people and actors who you think, oh, surely they've worked together many times because they have that kind of shared sensibility. Keiko, I want to share a couple of the highlights that I picked out for you. Okay, it's. I mean, yeah. Okay. I'm going to paraphrase some of this for our family audiences, but one of them is "Stupid effing bird."
Yes.
Yeah. And I recognize the fella with you in that picture. I think you know this guy.
He's pretty cool. The show went so well that we decided to get married.
See?
A couple years later. It's not a big
See how theater. See, I said sharing stories
working
and
with
connecting.
Yeah.
I love that. That's amazing. And Caught. Tell me about Caught, because this looks really intriguing.
Oh, yes. This is a Christopher Chen play. He's really cool. Side note, also, he looks like my brother, but that's unrelated to why I think he's so great. But he wrote this play that it kind of is like a play within a play within a play. And every act, you think you're somewhere, and then the playwright just twists it into this whole thing. So it starts off with this, it's like you think you're in you're in an art installation, and then it turns out that the art installation turns into a scene, and then it turns out that that's the people in that scene bow, and then next up we have a talk back, and then after the talk back we see those two people at home kind of like shooting the shit and not making fun of, but really like deconstructing what you just saw. So it just is like this really wild ride of a play. Yeah.
And then a classic that has become a classic, and then another classic, and a revival, and a classic of the revival is Dangerous Liaisons.
Right. Yes. This is maybe one of the coolest outfits I've ever gotten to wear. And mostly because of the wig. I think my wig experience on this is maybe a little different than Lamar's wig experience as Frederick Douglass.
Did you both name your wigs? Because I know that's a habit of actors to name their wigs like names.
Guinevere.
That's so precious. No, I couldn't do it. I wanted to. As a huge fan of Schitt's Creek and Moira Rose, I really wanted to. But I was playing Frederick Douglass, and I was like, I can't do that.
Little reverence. So basically, your wig was Frederick.
It was. He was. I just did everything I could to not offend the black gods around me the whole time.
They'll make it rain on you.
They'll shut the show down.
Yeah. So both of you, there's a connection here, because I feel like just going through just those 6 productions, there's a commonality here. You have a lot of them, but I see a commonality in the type of actor that you are. You both have done what some might label as leading woman role, leading man role. And then you have both also done what we call a character actor role. And I think some of that might be intentional to like expand your work possibilities. Some of it maybe it's both work possibilities and just like there are interesting leading player parts to play and interesting character. But what is it for you that you find your both of your, especially since you're relatively in the young part of your career, and usually the character part happens later. And I just wonder, you embrace that early on, both of you. I've watched the body of work you're doing, and it's both those things alongside of each other. You're not waiting to become the character actor. What's that all about? I'll start with you, Keiko.
Yeah, I mean, I think that partially my introduction into working is, not seeing a lot of people that look like me play leading roles. And so I kind of always thought that I had to be funny or sillier and I actually think that's a huge benefit to me now, because people tell me to try something, and I will, I'm like, let's stop talking. Let's just try it. Let's just try it. Let's go crazy. Let's go wild, and then try it once, and then we can figure it out from there. Being able to play more leading roles was actually that was actually the part that was a little bit more surprising to me that I would get to do at all. And particularly, when I got, especially when I started doing work with, especially Seattle Shakespeare Company, who I got to, I mean, as like I'm 5'9", a very tall Asian gal with freckles. I didn't think getting to play Beatrice in Much Ado or Helena in Midsummer, like I just didn't really see that kind of thing happening. And so that was actually the surprise, was people entrusting me in carrying a show, because we talk about leads, and what I've learned the hard way is that being a lead isn't just having the biggest part. It's about being able to be a leader in the room, and setting an example and setting a bar, and expectations. And
that is so well said. And I bet you, Lamar, you can speak about that, because I saw you in Take Me Out, and there's a lead role that, boy, it is a sort of, it's a strange leading role, because there is character work in there is leader work in there, and then there's the marginalized other in that role too. Right. Tell us about that experience of being, the role is built to be marginalized, but also be the engine of the play.
Totally. That was crazy. That experience was crazy, only in that, like, I approached it not as a leading role. I approached it as a character actor, in that, like, I had no frame of reference other than the othering of that leading character, in that he was Black and gay. But that's where it ended, because he was a very different human being than I am, in that he leads in a way that some would say is totalitarian. Yes. I mean, he was incredibly egotistical, and he was also closeted. And that was part of the journey of the story, was that he was coming out. But I knew absolutely nothing about baseball. And so I had to learn from the ground up, read several books, and watched several videos, and became a huge fan of baseball because of it. And learning how to be a team player. I wasn't a sports kid in the slightest degree. And so I approached it very much as a character actor, in that I did all of the homework I possibly could, and then put it on like a suit and try to find my own way in, emotionally connecting to the character and all of that stuff. And then when it started to fit, that's when I became the leading actor in that role. So it was an incredibly different experience, creatively speaking, than I was ever used to. I had to employ both my character actor craft and tools in that toolbox, and then the leadership part that being a leading actor requires, that Keiko said so beautifully. That came when we started to be in performance, where I was just like, I'm literally playing the star player, and I need to be the star player as a star player for my company. It was a feat.
I think it's such a valuable lesson to even outside, and certainly outside, not even outside, certainly outside of the theater, in every aspect of professional life. If you do the work, people will notice leadership. If you do the work, people will notice tenacity. People will notice you trying to break out of the norm, or break out of your comfort zone. And that's where people excel in any business, in tech, in arts and sciences, in whatever it might be, in farming. And I see it, like, when people go, I'm going to do something new today. I'm going to do something a little bit daring. I'm going to come out of myself a little bit. And people, especially the people who can make the higher decisions, go, look what they just did. I didn't see that coming. So it's a really valuable lesson for us to be watching out for those opportunities for us to break out, because it's important that we do that, so we can create the chapters in our lives that we want, so that we don't wake up and go, I wish I had done that,
Yeah.
So both of you are no strangers to. I promise I'll get to the nitty gritty stuff in a second. I just want
Oh, the
to
meat.
I want to celebrate you two for just a second more. Both of you are no stranger to the Gregory Awards, which are the Seattle Theater Awards, and it's just great. I want to see that Octoroon picture because this is a fascinating play. I've only read it and I've never seen it.
This was the first time I saw Lamar, I think, in a performance.
Wow.
I think that's true. You were so incredible.
Wow.
Yeah,
thank you. That's greatly appreciated. Wow.
Hey, Kevin, do you have that? Kevin's our tech person behind the scenes. He's working his magic. Do you have that picture of Lamar's acceptance of the Gregory Award? Do you have that teed up? You ain't playing.
I was not.
You were not playing at all.
It was such a Cinderella moment. And at the same time, it was like my Cinderella moment in the way that, like, I didn't expect to win. I really didn't. People say that, but I really didn't. And then, because the people that I was nominated with were just fantastic in both categories. And then when it happened, I was like, what? And I was in a row of all of like my tribe, and they were all going crazy.
So do you mean to tell me that you dressed for the after party and not for the award?
No, I dressed. This is a peek into my psyche. I dressed to lose. Like, I was like, if I'm going to lose, I want to look flawless. Like, I want people to be like, I want my picture taken with him.
Okay.
Oh, I wanted to look like a winner. And I guess that's one of those things, like that TED Talk about, if you stand in a superhero pose, you attract that or whatever. But I'm
putting that right here. That is a note to self. Dress.
Like, but at the same time, those ballots were already cast, so who knows? But it happened, and as soon as I stood up, because this is like the way my life goes. As soon as I stood up, the wrap I had on my head fell down. The dress completely fell off my shoulders, which I had tailored to me by the amazing artist Margaret Toomey. Shout out to her.
Yeah.
And so, like, I had it tailored to me, and for some reason, the whole thing fell apart. It just fell. And I was like literally running up to the stage, hiking up the corset part of it, and trying to rewrap the thing over my head. And I was just like, no, this brand of comedy is the way I would write my scripts.
Did you get it back together, or did you accept without it altogether?
Without what?
Did you get it back on your head?
Absolutely not. Though the whole thing was a farce. The whole thing was a farce.
You looked so graceful. I remember this moment. You were so elegant. I can't believe what you're telling me right now.
It's so true. And then I spent the entire acceptance speech so self-effacing, praising everyone else who should have won that same award, except for me.
But that's what it's about. We share in each other's glory.
Absolutely. This community is so tight that I felt it would be a shame to not mention the other artists in the room.
It's one of those things. I used to go to the coffee shop in the apartment where I live in Capitol Hill, and I saw that poster. It's like, oh, man, I wish I'd seen that show. Which brings me to another image. Keiko, your Gregory Award for Nadishiko.
Yeah, Nadishko. Yeah.
Nadishko.
Perfect.
Let me tell you something. Just the image tells you gotta see this. And so tell us a little bit about that experience and the award experience, but more like what it is, outstanding new play. That's amazing.
Yeah, that was truly a life altering. I mean, I do think that, award shows are they're as big a deal as you make them. And I was like happy. I had a great time. It was fun, but also, but truly for me, it was really kind of life altering. Just in it felt like I had been thinking about writing for so long, and then really wrote something that felt unique to my point of view and my perspective, and so to get, I don't know, just to have people appreciate that in any way, it really I think it really shaped my future, and my kind of change in direction from maybe writing is something that I do in my free time to maybe writing is something that I do.
Mm-hmm. Look, I think that to me the highest value of award shows is community, our celebration of each other, and getting great stories about malfunctions of
and
wardrobe. Yes, I mean that's that's what it's about, and I just think that's amazing. And so that brings me to another overlap that you both share. You both are playwrights now, and here's another overlap. In this time of where we are, where theater's not happening, and theater's of course happening in other places of the world, but there's pauses all around the country, and I know that both of you have your sights on television. But before we talk about that, I want you to promise me that we're not going to completely lose you, that the live theater will have you revisiting us either as a writer or performer, or as both. Can you promise me that at least?
Yeah,
I promise. Listen, TV and film are just calling for the health insurance.
Okay. We'll see. I just want you to come back for my own selfish reasons. That's
great. Yeah.
So some nitty gritty stuff, because I do think that that writers have responsibility to, of course, write what they want to write, but there are other responsibilities, just socially, communally, ethically. And so when you write about issues, I know, because I've spoken to both of you, not at length about these things, but I know that you hold this inside your bodies and your minds and your hearts. Talk to me about the power and responsibility of these subjects, and we'll touch on them a little bit each, and then we might go back, but I just want to make sure we get to all of them. And I'll start with Lamar. What do you think your power is talking about politics, and your responsibility for talking about politics within your work?
It's very simple for me. In order for me to not run aground of it being preachy, I just think about what I want to hear, like what I want to see. There is a version of me that's 8 years old, that's 16 years old, that's 25 years old, and I get those kids in a room, and when I'm writing, I listen to the voices that I'm siphoning in to put on paper. But then when I'm proofing it and getting ready to re-edit for another draft, whatever, I take it to them and say, like, this is what you wanted, right? This is what you wanted to see. It's representation matters, but it starts with me. That's just my funnel. It's what did the little Lamar want to hear? And it ends up happening to be political in a way. It just happens. Politics just isn't all of that. And I feel like I didn't sign up for that. I feel like that's something that the world imposes upon me. The world tells me that that other guys like me are getting shot and killed every single day. That's what the world is telling me. That's not something that I'm putting out in the world. I would never want that. And so there is a response within the kid who sees that kind of thing, or the kid who watches Golden Girls or grew up watching Dynasty at his grandmother's knee and is just like, oh, those are really, really cool. I would love to see someone who was like me interacting with those characters. And that's and that tends to be political. Yes. I guess everyone else is like, whoa, that's crazy. And I'm just like, I'm only writing what I want for me. So I guess it's inherently selfish, but I think of it as inherently, it's a way of self-care.
What about you, Keiko? Do you have that? Do you feel a certain responsibility or power, or both?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to what, I'm in grad school right now, so I also am TAing. I'm teaching like 18-year-olds how to write plays also, which is really enlightening. but what I come down to is always, what is unique to you? What is specific about your point of view and how you are going and moving through the world and your perspective. And so, as people of color, of course, that's going to going to paint what we write because that's the world that we know. And I do think that there's a the more on one hand, you don't want to cater to audiences as we know them. We want to write and the right audiences will come. At the same time, I think that the more specific your world is and how specific your story is, it actually just becomes more accessible to everybody because people start relating in a way that is going to be really surprising and unexpected. And so, I think my world is inherently political just because of my point of view. I don't write political plays, though I am thinking of writing one about the mother of a senator who goes to starts devil worshiping to move her son along in the political world. So I guess that is extremely political. But that's not my go-to.
Well, it's really. Thank you for both those points. I'm going to actually keep going with you, Keiko. What about violence and sex?
Oh yes, I do write about those things. I think that I wrote this play recently called Wad. That's actually going to have a digital production in early next year through Act Theater in Seattle. So that'll be online. But that one is that's a play about someone who's on death row and a pen pal relationship that he has with a teenage girl, and the relationship is confusing and complicated, borderline sexual, but not quite. It's a very confusing play in that way, and I think that I am drawn to sexuality and sex in just in the complexity of it, and the it's not just we love each other and then we consummate this love. There's a lot of complicated relationships that come out of sexual attraction, and the same with in that place I'm also really kind of focusing on our obsession with violence. I think that I'm a true crime lover. I love listening to podcasts. Yeah. I've gone through all the great podcasts. Now I just listen to old episodes of Dateline on my phone because I just can't get enough of it. And it's kind of just calling myself out on like, why is this so?
Yeah.
What's so interesting about this to you, and how are we, romanticizing criminals and criminal cases? And a lot of my writing, I think, comes from calling myself out, actually.
Yeah, and Lamar, if you were to take that baton with sex and violence, what would you say about the power and responsibility of the writer, and specifically you?
I think it's just, this is going to sound so cliched and rote, but it's a standard. It just needs to be true. It just needs to be true to you, a good close friend of mine, when I was writing my one-man show, and I was just coming to him being like, can I write this? Can I write this? Can I say this? Is this okay? Will people find this interesting? Whatever. And he just kept saying, what's personal is universal, What's personal is universal. So they don't need to know or understand the specifics or the circumstances, but your response to those things will be universal. People know what it's like to feel trapped. Now, how you create that, the circumstances and the details around that may not be familiar to them. They may not have served time in prison or are a war refugee, but everyone knows what it feels like to feel trapped, And so when it comes to sex and violence, personally speaking, it's so weird because I'm also / a fight choreographer, and I love hand-to-hand combat because it's so visceral and it's so it's personal. Like, you're really not using a weapon. You're getting in there to physically harm someone. But as far as my what I can absorb in terms of violence, it's very little. I don't get squeamish. I just think that I don't need to ingest that kind of food, But in my writing, and I guess the director part of me walks this line too. I'm trying to find the most physical way to express, for characters to express what they want from each other or what they need from each other.
Mhm.
And if it happens to be violent, then it's the most effective way for them to express that. And I won't shy away from that. But then I just kind of leave it up into the director's hands, like, all right, I wrote it, so good luck with that. You know, and when it comes to sex, I think sex is incredibly brave. I'm also another / a former sex counselor. And so like, I think that I used to tell my clients the most terrible thing is sexual shame. It's the most damaging thing in the world. And it just leads into so many other parts of our psyche. And so I hope when I write sex scenes, nudity into a scene, it serves a greater purpose of storytelling, but an even greater purpose, I'm hoping, of healing sexual shame by doing that.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Lamar, speaking of, you brought up the word nudity, and playwrights throughout our ages have been fascinated with it. And sometimes I think it perplexes audiences. Like, well, why do they have to take their clothes off, or why are they? And I think I feel there, for me, my responsibility is to share with audiences that every playwright who does that, unless they're terrible, and we won't even talk about those people, there is a reason. It has been thought out again and again and again. And so I just want you to express some of that, like how you feel about it, the use of it. I know you've...
Can I just preface this with both of us have been nude on stage?
Oh my God,
yes,
that's
yes.
great. Yeah, that is actually great to note.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That's great to note for people who are about to judge what we may say, is that we have ourselves been nude in front of an audience.
Yeah, keep going.
I would say that for me, it has to be rooted in story. It just has to be rooted in story. That's all there is to it. It's not gratuitous if it's rooted in story and it literally is circumstantial to the storytelling, you know, like it's part of the story. It helps buoy it and lift it up. I think that it's a funny thing being nude on stage. It was on my actor bucket list. I used to tell people that all the time, like, God, I can't wait. I mean, like, I'm scared, but oh my God, I really, really, really want to do it, because the actor in me wants to be that vulnerable on stage. I'm always trying, as an acting student or whatever, I'm always trying to peel back and be as like the most molecularly vulnerable as I can be on stage in order to give a truthful, believable performance. And there's so many things that can get in the way of that. And I'm like, God, if I'm just naked, then all I have to do is surrender to that. And it's a funny thing, because the audience then sees that. They see, you know, they're having their own relationship with it, they're shying away or whatever, and everyone's uncomfortable. And I'm just like, that electricity of uncomfortability is what theater is. Like, that's why we do it. Like, that's important. And a good playwright understands that and is using that, hopefully using that conversation to help tell the story more thoroughly and truthfully, and hopefully not using it to, for nefarious purposes. So,
Keiko, you want to take the baton on that? Take the relay?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, in general, I will say I'm half Japanese. In Japan, we are in hot springs. The nudity is just a little different thing in the US than I think it is in the rest of the world. And I think human bodies are just so beautiful. And so, you know, I have written a play in which someone would start to take their clothes off, and I don't think we actually got there. I remember getting a lot of pushback, and ultimately it came down to, is this necessary for this part, or is it just the implication? And ultimately it was the right choice for that show, having read it multiple ways. But having been nude in a show, I remember that experience as crazy empowering. I mean, truly, when you are nude on stage, you have the whole audience in the palm of your hand. They're looking at your every move. Are they comfortable? Oh my gosh. And it's just wild to have that kind of power. I mean, I don't think I've ever, it feels like I'm really power hungry or something right now, but I've truly never experienced anything like that before.
Well, that is why I use the word power and responsibility, because there is a power in it, and you feel like people are hyper listening. When
Yes.
to be on stage.
Oh, they are.
Yes.
I mean, and if it's taken that way, if you're taking it, if you're owning the fact that it is powerful, absolutely. We're Keiko and I are two specific kinds of body types, and it's just different because we're also virtually the same age, relatively the same age, and so that conversation is different from person to person, body type to body type, so on and so forth.
Sure.
But like, there is nothing more attractive, and I mean that in the Webster Dictionary definition.
Like, you want to see it. You
are drawn in by someone, regardless of body type, who is owning their body, fully clothed or naked. And it's just that much more in a stark relief, and that much more powerful, at least to me personally, when they are naked. It's just like, oh my God, they did it. They did the thing.
I saw a stark example of that at Williamstown Theater Festival. There was a play called The Shape of Things. And there was a woman, a quadriplegic, being bathed by her caretaker who became her lover. And just to watch, first of all, talk about vulnerability of naked on top of, you're also somewhat exploiting your otherness. And to watch that intimacy, I can tell you that the audience was moved beyond the idea of nudity. Now, what about profanity in the play? What is responsibility and power of a playwright's use with things that are in quotes, Keiko?
Yeah, I want to say fuck yeah. No, but truly, my relationship with cussing in plays is has changed. I remember writing something, and when I was younger, when I was in my early 20s, and someone just saying, this feels like the easy way out. And so since then, I've been a little bit more careful or thoughtful, deliberate, I would say, with how I'm using how I use profanity in my work. And sometimes it's like very freely. But I wrote this play this year called Exotic Deadly, or the MSG play. And that's a coming of age story with a teenage girl. And she, she's like, what the H is this? The friggin', blah, blah. And that says a lot about her. And so when she finally whispers the word bitch under her breath, I mean, truly, everybody in the room was shocked that she, we all were taken back to this teenage girl moment of like, oh my God, I can't believe she called someone a bitch. And
she graduated.
Yeah. And so it was really cool to write a script where, that was maybe the harshest word used, and it had weight because it was, the world around it was built deliberately like that.
What about you, Lamar? What about your use in
power? I think Keiko is right. It should be deliberate. That's the best way to describe it. I think that I started out in the other way. I was very much a purist as a budding writer, just being like, no, there's another way to write it. There is another way to write it, or whatever. And as I've become more confident about my writing, I'm giving myself over, or have given myself over, to the voices I grew up with around. I mean, I'm a 40-year-old man, but or will be 40, excuse me. Just aged myself. But I grew up in, I'm a brown boy who grew up in Brooklyn in the 1980s. I mean,
you heard some things.
I heard so many things, so many things before the age of 10, and so there's truth to that. That's truth to those characters, right? And to not put those words that are already in their mouth, or to take those words out of their mouth, is just is not true. It's just not true. And there are people who in the audience who will be like, oh gosh, that's unnecessary and so costing. And it's like, well, you feel that way, but if you met that person who exists in reality, there are whole communities of these people, you would feel and react the same way. I just wrote, but I do believe it needs to be deliberate. I just wrote recently a TV pilot that sets in slavery times, you know, on a plantation, and there is a white woman who I very carefully crafted so that she is, you know, for all intents and purposes, a Karen of a sorts, you know, and then when push comes to shove, and the slaves are freed because it's set on Juneteenth, and we get to see her true face and it falls, I made it a point that when we finally see her in the very last moments, that she just gives this huge monologue where she just rattles off as much as I could think, as many as I could think of, every racial slur against Black people that has ever crossed my ears. I wanted it all to come out like venom. And there was no F-bomb dropped at all, because I just believe that, you know, words are powerful in that way. And I think it's important because I wanted it to have that same impact and effect. My very last point before to wrap up is that, like, my favorite curse word is the F word because of its versatility. I think that that a really good playwright, I was going to name somebody, but I won't do it because I have problems with his work. But but he's still really good.
Neil Dubuque.
No, not.
You'll have to say yes or no.
No, definitely not him. But he's infamous for all of the F-bombs that are dropped in his plays. And if it's the first person you're thinking of, it's him.
Okay.
Yeah, and so, and I just think that there's something, you know, it can be unnecessary in certain times, but also I think that, like, there's a certain music to hearing that when it's used well. When it's used well, and there are a bunch of characters who talk that way in a room, and they're just dropping the F-bombs. If you've sat with anyone who grew up in, like, say, Jersey City, like, and they're just like any of those families, like, there's a music to it, and that shouldn't be negated. That should not be negated. And it should show up in writing. It should definitely show up in writing, but in a smart and deliberate way.
Great. That thank you both for that. That leads me to the last point of the responsibility and the power of race relationships inside of plays. You both touched on it. Boy, it's such a complete episode topic. And I'm sorry, another episode. We might come back and visit that. But I just wanted to start to touch on it because it's sort of, you know, there's these topics that are on our minds every day, like COVID, like every day. That's a thing. Right. And then there's this underbelly. And it's often, to me, the most powerful things are the things that are in the solar plexus, just kind of churning in there. And really, race relationships, frankly, is one of those items for me. It's always underneath everything, it seems. And so I just want to talk about the power and responsibility of talking about that in a play. Keiko.
Yeah. I do write a lot of Asian American characters. I write a lot of Asian American stories. You know, not all of them are. I think my responsibility, I find, as a playwright, is to never take the easy way out, even if it's woke right now. And so I think it's really, you know, I remember.
Can you say that again?
Yes, it's my responsibility as a playwright not to take what did I say?
The easy way out.
Not to take the easy way out, even if it's woke right now.
So true.
Because I think, you know, I remember when we were writing, I did this 1448 for Village Theater as a musical. It was like a musical theater one where we were writing these 10-minute musicals, and my team, we were or actually all of the teams, you know, the topic that an audience member gave was something like watching someone in political power
get their comeuppance.
Get their comeuppance. That was exactly what it was. Wow. And you know exactly what the audience member wants. We all knew what it was. And we didn't give them that. We
It
gave
was
them,
so gratifying for you not
yeah,
to give it to us.
yes. We didn't
We
know what
needed something else. We needed what you gave us.
exactly. Yeah. And so we were, we wrote something about, a queen in her garden, and
Yes.
it was something like
With the
that. And it was about,
roses. It was
yes,
gorgeous. Yeah.
exactly. And it
Yeah.
was really, but that, and I just think of, it's, a lot of people are wanting these plays that are just really easy, as far as like, this is what a good guy looks like, this is what a bad guy looks like, and the world is just not that easy. I grew up in the South. I have a complicated relationship with the South, but Southern hospitality is a real thing. And
Yes.
also, I mean, there are, it's just not that easy. And so I think that my plays are sometimes not as easy to swallow. I remember during Nadeshko hearing some people thought that my my characters of color are too rude or too unlikable, and I'm like, have you seen a David Mamet play? And so there's like there is an expectation that I think we put on people of color in stories, and an expectation, that a negative expectation that we put on white characters in those stories a lot of the times. And we're not doing anybody any favors by simplifying human beings that much. And so it's my responsibility to maybe ask harder questions and complicate those people a little bit more. And I think that'll ultimately make, build empathy and make the world a little bit better.
Oof. Balls in your court, Lamar. What do you think?
No, absolutely right. Absolutely right. I think that's a beautiful macro answer. And so I'm going to say, speaking personally, just individually with me, it goes back to what I was saying earlier, that I use myself as a litmus test. I'm only telling stories I need to see and I need to hear. I can't see, hear about Breonna Taylor and not have feelings about that are unresolved. And the way that I'm going to resolve them is in my art and through my art. And so it's going to come out that way. It's just the way it is. Last year, I wrote a short play, a one act, that I hope never sees the light of day, to be perfectly frank. I've said that a few times because I really mean it. I realized that I had so much anger built up in me about race, and about specifically my relationship to race and my relationship to white people as a queer Black man, that I needed to get it out, just to get it out. Because we were in the middle of a snowpocalypse and I couldn't, take Taekwondo classes. And I didn't want to hurt myself. And even though I really needed to hit something or someone or some people. So instead, I wrote a play with all of these characters who looked like me in different time periods in history, who had to run up against this very same conundrum. And I just spit venom and suffering and gave voice to my depression and all of those things because they needed to have an outlet. And so I don't think there's anything wrong about that. We're all very much, because of COVID, it's ironic that we're in the middle of a pandemic, and yet I feel that what's happening with the country and yes, the world, is that there is an interesting healing that's happening. It's a healing that's not beautiful in that it's nice and easy and filled with morphine. It's a healing that requires salt and vinegar in the wound, and a cauterizing of certain things and severing of certain limbs. But it's the fastest way to root out some very evil problems we're facing, and racism is one of them.
And isn't it a valuable lesson to us that just the exercise of getting it onto paper or getting it out might be enough? It doesn't necessarily have to be put out to hundreds of thousands of people if you need to get that out for yourself. And I have a sneaking suspicion that 5 or 10 years from now, Lamar, you'll be able to look back at that thing that you wrote and your post that specific trauma and it might be useful to you in other areas of your writing or in your life.
I mean, I'd like that. I'd like to siphon it into other pieces. That would be fantastic. I think what gave me the freedom to do that was that one of my writer heroes is Liz Gilbert, who wrote of Eat, Pray, Love, Fame. She has a fantastic podcast about creativity. And one thing she said is that not everything you write needs to be seen. Sometimes it just needs to get out, and that's not up to you. Like when you give birth to it, that child will go on and do other things, but also that child may not even be liked by the world. So it may not even get published, So because you have no control of your children are their own people. Yeah. But that freed me up to be able to just be like, all right, I'm writing this out to get it out. And if for someone comes across that very, very wounded animal that I gave birth to and wants to take it in and feed it and domesticate it or let it run free in the wild, that's fantastic. But that's not why I did it.
So I have gotten to the point where I got we have to come back to this because there's more where this came from, and I really, really appreciate it. So I'm just going to ask you a couple of questions, and then I want to hear about some organizations that you like, that you support, a book, whatever, and Kevin will put it into the crawl, and we'll also post it after this when it rebroadcasts, and it'll also be on our website. But I'll ask you to fill this sentence in with one word, and the hint is that an ly word is your friend, and I'll just go from Keiko to Lamar, and you can just say, I say, Keiko, how do you discuss inequalities with your spouse? One word.
Delicately.
Lamar, how do you discuss inequalities with a mouse?
With a mouse?
That's for Lamar.
I love it. Humorously.
Keiko, how do you discuss lovemaking with your aunt?
Humorously.
Lamar, how do you discuss lovemaking with a debutante?
Brutally.
Keiko, how do you discuss God with a kid?
With the best of intentions.
Lamar, how do you discuss God with a squid?
You don't. Because that squid knows. They have stuff to tell us that we're just not hearing. Squids? Jesus.
I love that. Yes. Yeah, we should be listening to them and more listening, less eating them. Although they're delicious.
I'm going to eat my calamari.
I know. I'm not going to lie. No business being so delicious.
Yeah,
sorry.
Don't tell Japanese girl not to eat her squid.
Keiko, Lamar, thank you so much for sharing your stories, and I hope connecting. I'm going to say goodnight to you, and we will have you back. I can't wait to see you in person or to see you on screen again. You're just delightful, and you are both deep wells of stuff, all that stuff that I love. So thank you so much for being on Spotlight tonight. And a good night to you. Absolutely. Good night. Also, thanks to Kevin Vortman, our production support, Village Theater, and the incredible Village Theater artistic team. Next week, I shall take a little hiatus to make room for a special episode, Mama a Rainbow. That is led by our Village Theater casting director, Jessica Spencer, who will be joined by Shaunyce Omar and Diana Opong-Perry to share and connect the challenges of being an artist and a parent, and specifically a mother. So until next time, be well.